Hello and welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. 6 minutes late, but we're going to go for a full hour. Don't worry about that. Doing our own mini protest there, John, weren't we? 6 minutes since it's been 6 days since we've been last on. Um, it's Wednesday, but no Paul John today. Busy with other Acsom business, so you're stuck with us two rebel reprobates. How are you, John? How has your Celtic week treated you?
Uh, I don't know what to say.
It's not often you're lost
Do
for
you
words,
know?
John. Come on.
Well, do you know someone? I was up in the dog run yesterday, and a boy who's a Man U fan. He watched a bit of Celtic. He said, "I watched that." So I said, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Oh, tell you what, mate. Just watch the podcast tomorrow because I honestly, it's going to take too long. Can't be, but I've got to get these dogs home at some point." So no, I mean, look, it's just abysmal. I don't know where do you want to start, Patrick?
Uh, well, I suppose we could start with the game. That was the sort of first thing. I mean, or you could even start sort of at kick-off when the protest happened. Obviously, I think there was a meeting of the collective in Graces on the Thursday night to agree next steps. We then had the game on the Sunday morning, and from kick-off we had the tennis balls on the park again. Now, I think if a lot of people will remember the Bernard Higgins protest of roughly 4 years ago, and that was up at Dundee as well, and tennis balls in the pitch, and it was a successful campaign in that Bernard Higgins was not appointed to any sort of role at Celtic. There was a sort of 2 3 month long protest by the supporters, and it was successful in the end. And I think obviously the collective are keen to sort of draw on the lessons from that, with it being a successful protest. So they've went with the same again, throwing balls onto the pitch. And I noticed Kasper Schmeichel in particular was pretty annoyed by it. And I'm sure, the players don't want, they've been psyched up for the game and all that, got themselves in a mindset, and then, the game is delayed. But at the same time, we as supporters and the collective as a whole is sort of the point of the protest is on a macro level about how the club is run. It's not about, the first couple of minutes against Dundee. So I don't know if you want to sort of go into the tennis balls first off before going into the game. What
Yeah,
did you make of the
well,
protest, John?
100% for it. Absolutely 100% for it. No equivocation. And Casper getting annoyed, it might be the only ball he ever caught in his box. But the reason I'm 100% for it is because, as you say, this is about keeping the pressure on. And what I can't believe from some people is the infantilization of these grown men, like they're incapable of dealing with a delay. If you can't deal with a 3 minute delay, which could have been a VAR decision right from the get-go, if you can't deal with that, you're not fit for the boys' club, never mind fit for the champions, right? So at the same breath, we are saying Celtic shirts do not shrink to fit inferior players. We are saying that, and at the same time, we're saying that these men need coddled to the extent that they need a hug. Once there's been a 3 minute delay, do me a favour, right? And the Celtic players showed their support for the protest by displaying over the next 90 odd minutes exactly why there needed to be a protest. So we can assume that the Celtic players are all for it as well. So I couldn't agree more. We have to keep embarrassing these people. As I said a few weeks ago, we can't beat them in their own battlefield in the boardroom. It has to be guerrilla tactics. We have to keep this up. We have to keep the pressure up. This got on the news. It was on sports news above and beyond, not Celtic matters. So we have to keep it up. We have to keep embarrassing them. We have to keep it going. And the game itself should have been enough reason or enough verification of that fact. You know what I mean? It's, how you can see that game and then say, oh no, after all the games that we've seen previously, and then say, then you do with that delay. I don't know. I mean, as I say, treating them like babies, it's an absolute nonsense. And we must keep this up, 100% for it. I hope there's more of it, because by God, change is needed and needed drastically.
Yeah, absolutely. And always the caveat with protests is, well, we still need to back the team. I think it got to a ridiculous level. Um, when the Not Another Penny campaign was launched last week, and we'll go into that later. But those people on certain Facebook groups commenting about how this is going to hurt the team, and I think it was the Celts Are Here Facebook page replied saying, "What a ridiculous notion that the team is going to be hamstrung by me not buying a £230 jacket from Adidas. Don't be so ridiculous." And you make a good point, John, that if they are complaining, it is just like a VAR decision or, a Livingston goalkeeper wasting time. A 2 or 3 minute delay in a game shouldn't be, shouldn't cause that performance, firstly, and, shouldn't really be disrupting the team at all. Um, I also, for the record, I'm completely behind it. People didn't have a problem with it when it was Bernard Higgins, but, they seem to think, or some people think it might be hampering the team's performance. I disagree. I think you make a good point as well about how it got on the news. I think it does need to be a visual campaign. I think I said a month or two ago that ideas like, show Thatcher the red card back in 1988, the Scottish Cup final, that was obviously a very memorable protest by both Celtic and Dundee United supporters. Um, and the two most successful ones, I should say, were the Partick Thistle one and then this one at the weekend. It's a visual display. Not only does it get Celtic fans talking, it gets the commentary team talking. I mean, I think Rory Hamilton and Michael Stewart spent the full 90 minutes against Partick Thistle talking about our disastrous transfer window and our disastrous exit from the Europa League. And of course, the 3 minute delay, Crocker and James McFadden were talking about how unhappy the fans were and the pressure on the board and how it isn't going to go away. And it won't go away. I mean, this campaign, the Not Another Penny campaign, that's until the 3rd of February when the January window shuts. Um, so I think it was successful. I'm glad personally that they've moved on from the silent protest.
I
I
agree.
understand the idea behind it, but when you're watching on the TV and it's silent for 29 minutes or whatever it is, the commentary team's not going to pick up on that. That's not going to be a news story apart from a few
No.
Daily Record headlines. I think this is much more prominent. And as you say, the performance on the pitch showed why it was needed. I've seen, and I agree with it, the criticisms of Rodgers these last few days, and I think he's right to be criticised. I've seen umpteen fans calling for his head, actually, for him to be sacked. Now, I don't think that's the right way to go personally, but um, on a macro level, we do seem to stumble into this every 5 years, John. I mean, you've seen with Tony Mowbray, the disaster there. 5 years later, the embarrassment under Dyla in the semi-final that forced Dermot Desmond into embarrassment, and he was embarrassed into action. And then, of course, 2010-11, 2020, 2020, 2021, I should say. Easy for me to say. The disaster of the COVID season. So every 5 years, we sort of slide into this disaster season where we let things slip, we underinvest, we take our eye off the ball, and I think that's why these protests are needed. But just to talk
Well,
about Brendan Rodgers, sorry, on you go.
yeah, no, I was just going to say, it is ridiculous. Is what our board do. They get so wrapped up as they have done with how successful they think they are, especially with the money in the bank. So this time more than ever, they have become utterly complacent, as was demonstrated in that transfer window. Utterly complacent. And what they are just not seeing the cumulative effects of their decisions until now. So we've been saying for the last 3 years or so, you can't keep doing this, right? You can't keep stripping the squad for assets, for parts, and then not reinvesting the money. You can't do it. And then when you are trying to reinvest some money, you reinvest it in a dysfunctional way because you don't have a proper recruitment system. And that's another thing you haven't put in place, and you haven't put that in place because you don't want to agree budgets and have a director of football that will have any executive responsibility, because that way you can't just keep saying, oh no, I'll go back and offer them £1 million for that £10 million player. So all of these decisions will obviously have outcomes. Our board seem incapable of even having the vision to imagine what those outcomes would be. But this is a culmination of those outcomes. This is what happens. Our squad is in a dreadful place. You look across that squad, you have guys who are declining at the end of their careers. You have guys who have been off form and stale for ages. You have guys who absolutely don't want to be there. You have guys who are not close to the required quality. And, again, that's right across. And anyone who might be a decent player is getting sucked into this morass of everything else that's going wrong. So the squad management on the whole has been absolutely dreadful. Not even just the transfers in, the transfers out. But you can't, what are you supposed to do about that if you're if you won't put a proper transfer system in place? Because if you're relying on Brendan notoriously is not very good at identifying players. That's been throughout his career. So you have to have a proper system in place for doing that. We don't. And not just for Brendan. It was the same for Ange. It was the same for Neil Lennon. It was the same for Ronnie Dew. It was the same for Brendan the first time. Nothing has changed, right? So what we're doing is just repeating the same mistakes. We get away with it for a wee while because certainly until this point, we've had a massive resource advantage over the likes of the Rangers and Hearts, etc. To a large extent, we still do. But we have not utilised that in any way, shape or form. We haven't dealt with any of the problems that are clear to anyone that certainly has listened to this pod or any other pod, or having that conversation with your mates in the pub. We could have identified all these problems, and we have been identifying them for years and just been ignored because obviously we don't know anything. And the situation we're in now is a consequence of that. There is a danger that we will finish third this year, and that will ruin their claim to fame of qualifying for Europe in the last 19 out of 20 years, which is obviously, that was a great, what I think the claim for Celtic, in this league that we're in, we qualified for Europe. I mean, it is breathtaking, absolutely breathtaking, the level of incompetence it's got us to this point, the level of complacency, the level of arrogance, the lack of self-reflection, the lack of self-analysis, the lack of being able to identify critical problems and deal with them, and all of it to try and save themselves, save their jobs, milk that money as much as they can. And they will, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to continue doing that. The only way we save this season, in my view, is we have to buy our way out of it in January. And is that going to happen with this board? Almost 100% not. There's a 99% chance that is not going to happen. We'll get a couple of loans in and we'll struggle on and we'll lose the league. Almost, if we keep playing like this, as I say, we'll be lucky if we're second. Because that was abysmal. Dundee are pretty much the worst team in the league, and we didn't lay a glove on them. And all the reasons for that, so in terms of in terms of Brendan getting sacked, well, that's not going to happen. Although, they didn't sack Neil Lennon, but Neil Lennon was still friendly with them. They still liked him. There's quite a few people in that building would be quite happy to get rid of Brendan Rodgers, starting from Peter Lawwell downwards, because he was foisted on them. And from what we're gathering now, if you believe some of the reporting, Dermot Desmond's also fallen out with him again, which would explain why he hasn't been able to go over Lawwell's head to Dermot Desmond and get what he wants. So the whole thing's a mess, just a mess from start to finish. But most of it is avoidable and has been avoidable. And we could have done something about it at any point in the last number of years. We still haven't. And as you say, we're back to COVID season where it's just the blinkers on, appointing the wrong manager and then ignoring the fans. And then, we lose to 10. And we're just there again. It's the same people making the same mistakes.
Yeah, absolutely. And to any fan of any other Scottish club who might be watching, and you've seen them on Twitter the last couple of days that were overreacting after our first league defeat. I would sort of look back to the COVID season personally and say that eventually results catch up with performance, and we have been performing really poorly all season. I can't think of a single outstanding performance. you've seen for 30, 40 minutes against Aberdeen that we can play well. We beat Livingston 3-0. You know, you're really, really struggling. I mean, it's absolutely abysmal, the run of performances we've put on. I put out a tweet um, listing all the teams that we'd failed to beat this season, and then underneath it saying that we needed last-minute winners against Motherwell, St Mirren, and who's the other one? Kilmarnock, the penalty against
Mhm.
Kilmarnock. So to say that we're struggling this season is a bit of an understatement. If you look back through Rodgers' career, his third season is always unimpressive. You know, it's as if after 2 years. And, you know, to be fair, I think modern football can be like that, where managers basically have 2 years before they either get sacked or get a better job. And obviously, Rodgers at Celtic, you know, his third season has been missed both times so far. But even looking at his third season last time, you know, we obviously went out to Athens. We lost a game to Kilmarnock at Rugby Park at the end of September. Don't know if you remember. And then, you know, we beat St Johnstone 6-0, and we really kicked on until Christmas time. And then we lost a derby. And then we kicked on again in the new year. And by the time that he'd left for Leicester, we were 8 points clear. And it sort of saved us that season. Lennon sort of got us over the line, ended up winning the league by 9 points. But we're now towards the end of October, and there's no sign of any improvement. You know, we all thought Kilmarnock might be the turning point. We all thought Motherwell just before the international break might be the turning point. But there doesn't seem to be a turning point yet, John. It doesn't seem to be happening for us. As you say, the squad looks tired, and especially with him not signing a new contract yet, maybe not even been offered a new contract yet, the chances of us spending big in January, which is famously a very difficult window. Uniquely for Celtic, it's a difficult window. A bit like the foreign tax laws that we only have to deal with. No other club has to deal with that,
No,
just us. So the chances of us spending big in January. I mean, you said it 2 years ago when we brought in Kuhn and Ida, that we had to go big in January and we didn't, and we got away with it because they collapsed. Um,
yeah,
but there's no chance of us spending our way out of this.
yeah,
So what I would ask you is, I mean, to go back even further actually than the Dundee game, you know, Brendan Rodgers done an interview with the BBC, done an interview with BBC Sport, and I don't know about you, John, but this sort of reminded me of the Sun article a month and a half ago, where there was a leak basically saying that he was working his ticket, he was trying to sell himself, and he's looking for a job next year down south. And we all believed Brendan. We all thought that was a lie, and we were all wanting the guy to be sacked. And of course, any leak should be sacked, especially at boardroom level, executive level. And I'm not saying that Brendan's looking for a job down south, but you've got to question why, when the team are playing so poorly, why he's doing 15-minute sit-down interviews with the BBC. Because I mean, we are quickly running out of time to turn this around, and it is beginning to feel like the COVID season where it just slowly gets worse and worse.
yeah, very much so. And you can only take Brendan's remarks one way, right? Because there's a certain way to throw your team under the bus, in which it might be motivating for them. Most coaches won't do it because it might be motivating for them, but you don't know how it's going to be taken. You can't be sure of that, and therefore it's dangerous to throw your team under the bus, even if it's deserved. But what he's done there, I mean, you can't interpret that because what he's basically saying there is, I'm grand, I know how to play the game. We need to play, you need to play this way. This lot are all garbage. That's effectively what translates to, they cannot play my tactics. They cannot play the way that I want to play the game. And you cannot interpret that in any way as being somehow a subtle dig at the players that's going to get them motivated. That is Brendan protecting Brendan. That is Brendan putting it out there. I don't have the tools at my disposal to turn this around. I'm still brilliant. These guys aren't good enough. That's the only way to take it, in my view. I don't see any other way. So when you're at that stage now, I mean, you're probably saying something like that. If you hadn't already basically lost the dressing room, you will now. Another thing that is a massive problem is the fact that we've got so much going wrong now that the fact that the manager's leaving at the end of the year would normally be a huge issue. but it seems to get lost amongst the morass of everything else. So the manager's leaving. They're not going to offer him a new deal. He definitely doesn't want a new deal at this point. So that knocks on to the players, because the players don't have to play for this guy. Why would the players kill themselves for this guy, on a personal level? They don't have to. He's not going to have any impact on their careers, and half of them want away in January anyway. Even if we're not buying anyone, there'll be a few of them looking away. At least a few that we know of. So there are all sorts of issues there with Brendan and looking away. And I think from his point of view, I found that statement to be really embarrassing, because, when I saw that team for this game, which he had a couple of weeks to prepare for, and then you saw that result, you're like, if he plays 4-3-3 again, he should be sacked on the spot. If he's trying to shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic and play the same way, he should be sacked on the spot. Not that he will be, but he should be. To have 2 weeks to prepare and then come out with Yang and Ralston on that side, in order, you are sacrificing, right, better players to play a system which we've proven in the last nearly a year now doesn't work. It isn't working. Right? When was the last time we won a big game? When was the last time we won a derby or a crunch game? When it really mattered, and we didn't have to rely on penalties and stuff like that. So it's not working. It's not working for a huge variety of ways. Now we'll come to the players in a minute, but the tactics are rank rotten. The selection is rank rotten. To have all that time, to have seen the way that we've been playing, to think that because we managed to snatch a win against Motherwell, well, that's the turning point. And then to play Yang, mother of God, the boy was out the door. Do you know the most embarrassing thing? I saw his stats the other day. He's getting like 76 appearances or something for Celtic. Outrageous. And he's never been a player. He had 5 minutes of periods of a game where he looked like he might be something. Apart from that, he's never been good enough. And he, in the midst of this, Brendan takes 2 weeks and picks him. And I don't know what he's playing at, but again, his tactics for a good while now have been outrageously poor. And his selections have been outrageously poor. And he is so dogmatic. At this point, but you see what Ange did when he went down to England and it was in the Europa League. He changed his tactics because he knew they'd get battered. Everyone's worked out how to play against us. Everyone. So they all set up the same way. You remember when we played decent teams that hadn't bothered scouting us properly, like Bayern Munich, and we had good players in form at that time. I was out my seat applauding by the time we got to the halfway line, because the way we played out of that press was unbelievable. The skill our guys showed getting out of that press was incredible. Nobody presses us now because they know we can't hurt them. So we just, everyone we play just runs back into their half and says, come on ahead then. Do your worst. And we do exactly that. We do our worst. So you come to, the tactics. I mean, Callum McGregor there, had something like 103 passes. Less than 6% of them were pack passes, right? So he hasn't broken the lines or made a forward pass that took anyone out of the game at all for only 6% of his passes. So he's had 100 and odd passes, and 6 of them were dangerous. The rest of them were sideways, backwards, achieving nothing, right? And it's the same with the centre halves. So they're just passing between each other and passing, and we're so slow, and we're so pedestrian, and we're so predictable. And Rodgers is sitting in his hands going, see if I had better players, this would look better. And it would look better. You can't deny the fact that we've lost a lot of speed and goals. But then you come back to Rodgers' selection again. So we've lost speed. So what does he do? He relegates Yamada not only to the bench, but out of the Europa League squad, right? And we saw 10 minutes of Yamada. I don't believe for a second, and I said this before, that boy was like third or fourth top scorer in Japan a couple of years ago, right? You could play Johnny Kenny for any team in Japan and he wouldn't end up there. We are desperately lacking pace. We are desperately lacking the runs. We are desperately lacking the movement. And we've benched a guy that's his entire skill set. I don't care if he's the greatest finisher in the world right this second, but he'll create havoc and someone else can finish. So we're so far off creating havoc. We're barely creating, for the most part, Dundee could have played, their defenders could have played that game in their slippers. It is abysmal. It is absolutely abysmal. There is not a redeeming feature at all in any of those performances or any of those tactics or in any of those selections. It is a disgrace at this point. He's getting paid £3 million a year to twiddle his thumbs and go, we'll do the same thing again. We'll just do the same thing again. Because Yang and Ralston have been working so well this year, and the right-hand side's been absolutely, scintillating. And just doing the same thing again. And that's what you get £3 million for. Like, does he even need to come into work? He's like me, he could work from home. Do you know what I mean? He could Zoom call in and say, I just picked the same lads again.
It does make you wonder, John. It's in many ways it's a mystery of modern football, in my opinion, that these managers come in and they say, I've got this philosophy and I will not deviate. And that I think that's a severe lack in strategic thinking, where you're hired as a coach and in a game scenario you are unwilling to change, regardless of whether it works or not. You're totally unwilling to change, and Rodgers isn't the only one guilty of this sin. Ange, up until the Europa League final, I may add, Ange was guilty of this. I think you highlight Vincent Kompany at Bayern Munich. I think Vincent Kompany is a prime example. One season with Burnley, playing football the right way, and he gets the Bayern Munich job. It's absolutely incredible the way that modern football operates now, where, like what you're saying about the squad, basically, I'm magic, but the squad isn't good enough to play football at my level, which is effectively what he said, and I think he's beginning to lose any sort of PR battle that he's trying to play out, because to say that you don't have a squad good enough to beat Dundee, who are the worst team in the league by far, they are easily the worst team in the league. Battered 4-0 off of Aberdeen, who up until that point hadn't scored a goal in the league, and yet they conceded 4. So easily the worst team in the league. But I think that the thing that hampers him the most is squad selection, as you say. He's complaining about the squad that he has. Yet we sign Austin Trusty for $6 million, and there's no way he is worse than the two that are playing now. I'm not a fan of Liam Scales. I don't think he's good enough. And maybe it's been caused by playing with Liam Scales for 2.5 years, but Carter Vickers is a shadow of his former self this season, making mistake after mistake. There's no way Trusty, who I don't believe to be injured, I don't think he is injured, just nowhere near the squad, had a great
No,
pre-season.
he had a foot injury. I think he's got plantar fasciitis, which can be quite painful. But plantar fasciitis is pretty much a sort of chronic condition. I'm not sure there's a short-term fix for it. I had it for a while. It went away eventually, but you weren't doing any physio for it or anything, so I don't know how you get around that. But to your point, that is exactly, if you're playing, for me, I would play a 3-5-2. Now, I'm sure all of this has been covered on other pods, but to be honest with you, I've not been able to bring myself to watch them. But I would play, my back three would be Alistair Johnson, Trusty, and Kieran Tierney. So Kieran Tierney's done that job, Alistair Johnson has done that job, and the thing that Trusty has that the other two don't have is pace. Right? So if you're at the CCV, I totally agree. He's just completely lost it. And Scales has been pretty decent this season, but he was tripping over himself at the weekend. I think it's just the whole sort of panic goes through the squad at some point. But I would play, if Trusty's fit, that would be my back three. And we'll come on to the rest of the team later. But, you know, you have to stop the horseshoe of death. That's the first thing. We have to speed up possession. We have to speed up the play. We don't need or shouldn't need 5 people sitting at the back for the likes of Dundee or for the likes of most teams that we play, to be perfectly honest with you. And we have serious problems in the midfield with the way that we're playing, and we need to address those. But the good news is most of our squad are midfielders, so we can address it. It is possible we can turn this round by changing a few things, but it needs to be fundamental for me. And even when he switches to the 3-5-2, because he was doing that in an emergency, he's playing all the wrong people. Do you know what I mean? He's not playing the people you play. James Forrest isn't your wing back in a 3-5-2. But that's the way he's playing it, because he's not considering it during the week. And then to come at that game, as I say, after 2 weeks and play a 4-3-3 with those players and then have to panic and change it to a 3-5-2 with all the wrong people playing, it's just beyond belief. And there's no hiding place for Brendan at this point. The board are an absolute disgrace, but Brendan, right now, he's not worth £3, never mind 3 million.
Well, and obviously the tagline, no free passes in the dugout or on the park. Just to go back to what you're saying on Yang and Yamada, it really does boggle the mind. And I don't want to accuse any manager of having favourites. It was a thing, we said about Neil Lennon, but
he definitely has favourites. He
definitely does, aye. But he would never admit to that. But I mean, you do. It does make you wonder, John. It does make you wonder. I seen a quote a few days ago. It was a question that was asked before the Braga game, before we lost to Braga, and it was about the exclusion of Inamura and Yamada. And of course, we all know the ridiculous quote about Inamura. You wouldn't want him facing up against Yamin Lamal. And you think, well, what are you talking about? What on earth is that? We're not going to be playing against Yamin Lamal. Dundee wingers is the opposition we're struggling to defend against at the moment. But I mean, Yamada, you highlight all of his qualities there. Not given a sniff. Paulo Bernardo. I mean, you talk about losing the dressing room. You talk about the manager throwing the players under the bus. I'd be putting a transfer request in if I was Paulo Bernardo. The guy is still a young player. He's coming in to the peak of his career. Can he get a game? Arne Engels, certainly divides opinion, Arne Engels. But when he comes on, with 8 minutes to go, he looks like our more creative midfield player. And when you look at the form of McGregor, Hatate, and Nygren, you do wonder why he's not playing. So you've got all these guys in the periphery of the squad, and you think, how are these guys not getting game time? You say there about Ralston and Yang, whipped at half time, right? Taken off at half time. You would assume that the manager is going to learn from this. But no doubt in a few weeks' time, we will see Yang back in that squad. Donovan, I believe, was fit to play, and yet he still perseveres with Anthony Ralston. So, it is a case of picking favourites. And when you say guys like Yang have 76 appearances for Celtic, and guys like Bernardo, Engels, Trusty, Yamada cannot get a sniff, it is desperately unfair. And again, it's a case of burning bridges, so I'll let you come in a minute, John. It's a case of burning bridges because we've seen it with the board and how the board operate. But, if you're going to sign promising young Japanese players and effectively never play them, send them out to the youth squad, why would any Japanese player come to Celtic ever again? We're signing these promising players, and it's just a case of the manager picking his favourites and then complaining about the squad that he has. I think a lot of questions have been asked of Rodgers this week. But anyway, I'll let you in, John. Sorry.
No, but I mean, if you even listen to the stats, guys, listen to Alan Morrison. Who would be a fantastic right wing back for us? Arne Engels.
Yeah. In a 3-5-2 setup.
Exactly. In a 3-5-2. Arne Engels would be amazing. And you could have, I mean, if we had any strikers, I'd be playing on the left-hand side. You'd play Maeda because he gets up and down exactly the way Tunekte didn't do at the weekend. But we need to play Maeda up front because we don't have any strikers. So I would play Luke McCowan on the left. He used to be a left winger. Do you know what I mean? So play him out there. He knows how to defend as well, right? And then you've got a midfield where you can, I would have Bernardo. Again, seriously, if it was up to me, I would drop McGregor. Callum's performances this year have just been abysmal, and it's not improving. And that, what I said there, that is because we are not, and I have to credit, Alan Morrison here, because I love listening to Alan's breakdowns of the thing, the games, because, you can see things happening, but sometimes you're not sure why they're happening. So I do appreciate his breakdowns of it, but we're not creating any overloads up front. So as he pointed out, we have three guys standing at the back. So we have McGregor, Scales and CCV just standing there doing nothing. And Callum's obviously not breaking the lines with his passing. And we're not, and our guys are outnumbered up front because we've got three guys standing at the back. And we don't have the movement in order to do anything about that. So it's just that's a shambles straight away. So 5 in the midfield, you're hoping you'll create those overloads. I would definitely be playing Bernardo, and if you want creative people in there, who you play next in the midfield. You've got some decent choices in the midfield, especially because the likes of Balak Wisher played at 10. Yeah, Nigrin played at 10. Do you know what I mean? Hatate could play at 10. So, I think if you're going to play McGregor, for me, the only way McGregor stays in the team is you tell him, you're in the forward positions, don't come back here under any circumstances. Right? And, we play a 10, or, you could have McCowan in the midfield with them if you had Dyson on the wing as playing as wing back. So, and then you'd have Nigrin or Hatate at 10. And then you'd have, potentially Iheanacho and Maeda up front. So already to me, that team sounds better. What we need to do is our squad is weak in a lot of areas. So we need to get our best players on the park where we are strong and we have decent midfielders. And get them on the damn park. How hard is it? And how hard is it to see that 4-3-3 is an absolute shambles in the same midfield that we've been playing all season? How hard is it to see that? And I'll tell you something that was pointed out to me today. I think it was Phil McGillivan. I think it was basically saying that the analytics department. So that analytics department, apparently we have an analytics department, which in terms of software and hardware is right up there with the EPL team. Nobody else in Scotland can touch it. We've got a thing that costs an absolute fortune, right? And only the top EPL teams have it. And it was brought in for Ange, and it is not being used. And my comment to that was, well, surely the football doctor's using it. And Phil's comment was, do you see any signs of life in the patient? So... and I thought, no, yeah, fair enough. Patients on life support. But I mean, if that's the case, in any other circumstances, I would refuse to believe that. But I do believe it because it explains a lot about the signings, the random, awful signings that just, square pegs and round holes. And it explains a lot about our inability to change tactics, our unwillingness to change tactics. Because if it's been thought about, if it's been analysed that way, then it's going to need to be dealt with, and he just doesn't want to deal with it. That Brendan should be embarrassed, mortally embarrassed by that team. Never mind throwing the players under the bus. You were the one that put those players on that park in that formation, and you can, we already know that the senior players have an issue with what's going on. And we also know there's if you run through that team, so they're okay. Let's run through the team. Ralston hasn't been playing well. I think Ralston had his peak of his career was about 2 years ago, was it? When he had that sort of, was it Juranovic was injured or someone was injured and he was playing?
I think that's closer to 4 years ago now, John.
Is it?
Aye, because it was. I remember it was like the second half of Ange's first season. So I mean, you're
Yeah.
talking 3.5 years ago at
Yeah.
least.
So that's how long it's been since Tony was good. CCV is well off it. Scales are doing well, but now, I mean, that was just awful at the weekend. KT is in all sorts of bother, I think, physically not playing well. McGregor, we've just discussed. Nigrin is at best average. Hatate has been poor all year. Ian Atchell is not the man for getting on the end of the play that we can create. Tenecte, we're so reliant on anything happening. It's unfair to blame that kid, but he's starting to look like Parma in terms of a one-trick pony cutting inside all the time. And I mean, Yang, I mean, good God, so, out of the people in that team as well, even if Maeda was in that team, Maeda should have been sold and replaced. Hatate should have been sold and replaced. McGregor should have been sold and replaced. CCV should have been sold and replaced. And so it goes on. I mean, the squad management to get to this stage is just abysmal. And managers to blame, players are obviously to blame with their performance. But you saw the difference in tactics, right? I just think back to last year. Admittedly, we had much better players, but the difference between the Dortmund game and the Atalanta game, I still think about that because they ran through us as if we weren't there in the midfield. Absolutely blew us apart. And then in that Atalanta game, we tightened the lines. We got much more compact, and we looked like a completely different side. So the tactics really matter. And not just our tactics, but the tactics everyone's going to play against us, which by now, it's the same. So we're playing, that's why all the games look the same. They are the same. Do you know what I mean? We're playing the same way, and so are all the opposition, because we're that easy to work out. You don't need to be Mystic Meg to work out what's going to happen when Celtic play. We are so predictable. No, apologies, Patrick. Again,
Not at all, John. Not at all.
you could do an hour on each one of these issues.
Well, I'm glad you're looking forward to Thursday night, John. That's all I can say. At least we'll have different opposition. By all accounts, Sturm Graz are quite a poor side, but they did beat, of course, the Rangers in the last Europa League match day. Although that's not any sort of achievement these days. And we finished a good few points ahead of them in the Champions League last year. But again, we know that's not going to be repeated this season. So certainly a slightly easier tie than Braga, but obviously we make Braga look like Barcelona at the moment. So, I mean, what are your expectations in terms of performance and results? Certainly performance, I think we're going to see much more of the same. In terms of result, the way that we are playing, I think it's got a draw written all over it, John. And then we'll come on to talk about Hearts in a minute. But firstly, what's your predictions for Sturm Graz?
Well, Sturm Graz weren't that good a team when they played Rangers, but they're a better team now. They've played 9-1-7, sitting at the top of the Austrian league, with the likes of RB Leipzig sitting behind them, and they have a game in hand as well. So they're playing well. After a performance like we've just had, it is difficult to see, because that performance didn't come out of the blue. So it's difficult to see within the space of a few days that being turned around. And I would have said a draw was likely were it not for the fact that our defence now seems to have the jitters as well. We still can't defend a set piece, and anytime there is a set piece, there's just outright panic. So not only are we struggling to defend the set piece, we are exposed on the counter constantly. I mean, if you look at Hearts, I was just watching the highlights of their game against Kilmarnock. Set piece on the counter multiple times, right? So, we have a real problem there. But the Sturm Graz, the way things are at the moment, I think we'd be lucky to get a draw, and I think we're going to lose. is the way I see it right now, unless something changes. If he goes more compact, if he goes 3-5-2, if he changes the tactics, I think we'll get the draw. If he doesn't change the tactics, if he tries to persist, if he goes 4-3-3 again, we'll lose. And for me, I don't think there's much doubt about that. And, I hope to be made to look foolish. I really do. I hope we pull a worldie out the bag, but it's been a long time coming. We have been poor for months now. Months. Going back into the end of last year, we haven't been playing well. And he seems incapable of turning it around. And he's got a presser at 3:00 today. And he'll say the same thing again. Do you know what I mean? He'll say the same stuff again. No, we need to be better. And he said that after the game, really disappointed with the performance, all the rest of it. And he talks about the pace and the speed that's out the team. But you have the ability to play the ball faster. The ball's not getting any quicker or slower. The ball isn't losing pace. The ball isn't lacking legs. Play the damn ball faster. Get it up the field faster. Create havoc faster. Create overloads faster. Whatever you're doing. I tell you, right now, punting the ball up the field would be better than we're doing just now. At least you'd have a chance to win the second ball and you haven't wasted 10 minutes. I mean, the amount of possession we had in that game at the weekend was outrageous compared to the chance creation. 82% and created virtually no chances. It beggars belief.
It's impressive in itself, John. And I think you touched on a point there. I was actually waiting on his post-match interview on Sky, thinking, what's he going to say? Because it's our first league defeat of the season. We've been building up to this. This has been a long time coming, this defeat. Poorest team in the league and we've lost and we didn't lay a glove on them. What's he going to say? And I expected him to sort of say something big or hold his hands up or, make some sort of statement. And total non-event, essentially. Just the same thing he's been saying for weeks, that not good enough. Poor first half. We didn't play football in the first half, essentially. And how often has he said that this season? We basically didn't turn up in the first half. Started at the Kairat game, basically didn't turn up, and it's continued through the whole season. Another one, a hallmark of every poor Celtic team, can't defend a set play. Basically, since I've started going to games, we've been poor at defending set pieces when we're in a bad run of form. So that's obviously a major concern, and the fact that Hearts are exploiting that in their games against other teams is a major concern. We want to talk about Hearts now. We obviously have the distinct possibility of being 8 points behind. Should we lose at Tynecastle? I was chatting to some of my pals yesterday. They pointed out that we've got a League Cup semi-final. Hearts don't. Therefore, Hearts will be playing in the league the following weekend. So should they beat us, we face the possibility of being 11 points behind Hearts on the 2nd of November. Now, that's a lot of if, buts and maybes. Obviously, 2 results have to go against us for that to happen. But this is the state of play, John. This is, the position we're in. And the one thing that does give me confidence, I believe David McInnes done an interview with Open Goal, and he basically highlighted why Hearts had started well and his integration with Jamestown Analytics, the Tony Bloom analytics company that's come in to help Hearts, and all the new players that they've signed. And he didn't seem to demonstrate a great understanding of what was going on. So it's a bit like Aberdeen's start last season. It's maybe a bit like Aberdeen's start under David McInnes when Ronnie was the manager for those 2 seasons. Makes a really good start, then falls away. So I think that's reasons to be cheerful, reasons to be optimistic, where he's not really embracing the Tony Bloom model under Hearts. He's just I don't want to say he's getting lucky, but he's got a Hearts team playing well, and that's not likely to last. But looking ahead to Hearts, I mean, if you're ever going to turn your season around, a crunch game against Hearts at Tynecastle when you have a few points behind them is an opportune moment. But as you say, John, essentially we need to change formation and change half the starting lineup in order to be playing better, because the defence is crumbling, the midfield is non-existent, and we can't get the ball to the striker. So just your thoughts ahead of Hearts at Tynecastle. I mean, essentially, when you're 5 points behind, it becomes a must-win game. I know they're going to fall away, but certainly to lose that game, I think would be an absolute disaster.
Yeah, they might well fall away, Patrick, but we're not exactly making strides. You know what I mean? We're not exactly running to catch up. And as things stand, as we've just said about the Sturm Graz, unless he changes things dramatically, and I don't mean tinker at the edges, and I said it earlier on, I don't mean shuffle the deck chairs on the Titanic. I mean, make a radical change. And if you're going to play a 3-5-2, play it with the correct players. I just, right now, as it stands, I would take the draw. Because I think we want to try and be in touch at the January transfer window and hope that we can sort things out. Now, as I say, 99% that will not happen, but it is only a ray of hope that I can see. Because Brendan has proven himself incredibly intransigent and unwilling to accept that there are, he should be playing a different way. And we don't have the players to, back when his tactics were stale, remember, when the tactics still looked stale at certain points, we had better players to compensate for that. And you tended to blame the players for not playing particularly well. But again, the tactics didn't necessarily help. In order to play the way he wants to play, we need to have better players playing better in form. And we don't. So the reality is he needs to get his best players on the park. There are other formations available, so he can go 3-5-2, 3-4-3, whatever, but we have better players in different positions that are sitting on the bench, need to be on the park. And we need to radically change what we're trying to do if we're going to have any hope at all. Hearts right now, it could be a bad game for us. It sickens me, absolutely sickens me to say this, because I don't know how many years we've been on here saying, basically having the same conversation. If your sole focus is so narrow that you don't care about Europe and you only care about securing the most minimal achievements like qualifying for Europe, which will be an achievement this year, if your focus is that narrow and your lack of vision is so utterly bereft that you are insisting on, looking at that as how to run the club, then it's going to be ever decreasing circles and ever diminishing returns. All you need to do is have the vision for Europe. Nobody's, and again, you have to clarify this every time someone else says, nobody's talking about winning the Champions League. You're talking about being a competitive team. There's only a handful of teams that can win the Champions League, but there are plenty of teams competing in it, making the money, making themselves, a reputation out there as a serious team. We could have done that. We could have done that repeatedly over the last 4 or 5 years. We could certainly have done it this year. And again, we choose to do nothing. We choose to do the minimal amount possible and try and get away with it. That lack of vision is going to cost us again this year. And is, quite frankly, I cannot understand how you can be in an executive position at this club and don't see that if you plan for Europe, that domestic dominance will take care of itself, because we do have a massive resource advantage. We do have far more money, and we always will have, coming into the club as it stands. So, to be so insular and so inward looking and not to have any vision at all for Europe, it's sickening. And this is why we are where we are. That's where it starts. So it starts with that attitude, and then the fish rots from the head. Because the players know that, the manager knows that. Now the manager's on his way out. The players still know that. The players know the board don't care. The players know that the board won't stick to their word in terms of selling them when they want to go. The players know that they'll be treated poorly if they're coming in and the manager doesn't like them. The players know they're coming in with no plan for them, no pathway for them. What a way to treat somebody. If you're like, say, Yamada, if you come in, that boy, what a disgraceful way to treat someone. Leave him out the Europa squad. Don't make any pathway for him at all. Don't put him out on loan. So he's sitting twiddling his thumbs. Him and Inamura as well. I just don't believe they're as bad as I've been made out. I just don't believe it. So, frankly, the number of problems we have, starting from the board downwards, it's never been a perfect storm like this, though. Not for a long time. With the board's incredibly bad attitude and unbelievable lack of vision and leadership, followed by a manager who's out the door, basically, followed by a squad that is, stale, out of form, over the hill, just not good enough in a variety of positions. That is a lot of things to fix. And this is going to be a very difficult season. And I think the Hearts game won't be any exception to that.
Almost makes you want to shrug your shoulders, John, doesn't it? Just like the CEO. I think he also said, I think it was a fan advisory board, he goes, I think the club are doing enough as it is. The club are doing enough as it is. They're just far too busy to deal with all these things. But you're right, it's a perfect storm, and it does remind me of the COVID season again, unfortunately, because it's poor club management as well as poor squad management. You've got guys who want out the door, and because their recruitment is so shambolic, you can't sell them. Because if you sell them, you're downgrading the squad massively. You might get, peak value, and your bank balance might go up, but there's no recruitment there. We can't replace a guy like Hatate when he's on top form because our recruitment is so shambolic. You can't replace guys like Carter Vickers. You can't replace guys like Nicholas Kuhn or Jota. I mean, we all forget the Jota replacement was Luis Palma, and look what happened. He dipped after 6 months. He was terrible for the following 12, and then we get Jota back in. And Kyogo's replacement was Ida's replacement was nobody, and now we've got Iheanacho. He's been given Yamada, but he's not for Yamada. So you're right, the squad is in some state. But I just want to quickly talk about as we're approaching the finish, the not is it not another penny, the hashtag not another penny campaign. So obviously, it's something that we discussed on here as something that is maybe the last step, because at the end of the day, people aren't going to stop going to games. I don't think. I mean, the situation would have to be dire straits for me to stop going to Celtic games, but something that's a lot more manageable is basically what they've asked us to do, which is to not buy merchandise, not buy any food or drinks while you're in the stadium, not to buy Paradise Windfall tickets, for example. And I just wanted to get your perspective on that, because it's something I've never really been a big one for buying merchandise. I've got 3 or 4 Celtic tops. That does me. I'm not one for owning 200 of them. It's just it doesn't appeal to me, especially the price of them nowadays. Pies in the ground. I mean, I didn't buy pies for a long time because I was so unhappy at how the club was run. Sometimes I'm too hungry and I just need to do it, but certainly until the 3rd of February, I'm more than happy to boycott it. My father, fair play to him, since CFR Cluj in 2019, hasn't bought a thing, hasn't spent a dime on anything apart from matchday tickets. He was so annoyed that Lennon been appointed, and then doubly annoyed at the Cluj exit of the Champions League, the lack of preparation, that he's not spent a penny since 2019, which is impressive. So that's obviously the ask for the next 3 months. You've got the Christmas period, so it's a double-edged sword where people might be tempted, and it might be their only option as a gift. But at the same time, the club probably makes a lot of money from these Christmas sales, so you've got the hope of hurting the finances because we've got enough finances. So obviously, your perspective, you're in Ireland. You obviously are a big fan of merch. You obviously own a lot of merch. I just wanted to get your perspective on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I need to be a big fan of merch because obviously there's nothing more fetching than a man in his mid-50s and full kit. Pretty much today. It's pretty much designed for guys like me, very overweight guys that are very old, and that's who buys the merch. But certainly, I don't need to give them another penny. I've given them plenty, so I have all the merch I'm ever going to need. And as I say, you look at that last drop that Adidas did. And I was going to say to people, you should boycott this, but I don't think that's necessary, really. I mean,
70 quid
that
for a football, John. 70
that
quid.
that that kit that KT was wearing, that jumper that KT was wearing, and the only people that would be buying that would be buying it to keep their guide dogs warm. It's absolutely horrendous. And the amount of money they were asking for it, and then obviously all those smocks get bought for 240 quid or whatever, and then they're on eBay for 355 minutes later. And good luck to anyone that's doing that. And if they can make a few quid doing it, if that's what their business is. But no, man, I mean, fortunately, the boycott coincides with, I mean, that I think that's Adidas's worst ever drop of merch. It's horrendous. And the cost of it is just unbelievable. Really unbelievable. And we have, we already have the kits and everything that cost a fortune, but the cost of that stuff is just wild, absolutely wild. And I don't know how anyone can afford it on it, I mean, I always wait until there's a sale, at least I did anyway, but, even if that stuff wasn't, you couldn't pay me to buy that, to take that stuff off your hands. Do you know what I mean? It's absolutely horrendous. Anyway, on the wider point, yes, I 100% agree with it again. It will be a while before we see it, though, because they get paid in advance for certain stuff with Adidas, so it's going to be a while before they see those numbers coming through. But giving them an issue with the sponsor is definitely there will be conversations had there, and if they don't have an answer to Adidas are not going to be want to be partnered with a club whose fan base are actively saying, do not buy anything off of this company. Anything Celtic related off of this company. So it is, I think, a correct approach, but also one of a multi-pronged approach for me. It needs to be the protests need to continue. That protest needs to continue, and again, I don't think we need to explain why at this point. And I think anything that we can do as a protest that doesn't, where nobody's going to get hurt, I'm 100% behind it. Where, I mean, I didn't agree with the silent protests. I didn't think they were very effective, but I would have participated in them. And I think people need to do that as well. It's collective action. You might not agree with it. You don't have to participate in it, but you also don't need to slate it. You can just decide, see that a lot of people have agreed to do that in a unified way that we haven't seen before. I think as I tweeted out the other day, Patrick, the one thing you can say about the club at the moment is there is a huge amount of unity. The fans are unified against the board, and the manager and the players are unified in being garbage. So there's lots of unity. Anyway, I think I'll try and leave it on that light-hearted note. But it's yeah. Right now, I think we all know things are grim. So I wouldn't be looking to Celtic to cheer you up for the next wee while.
No, probably not. It should be interesting tomorrow. They've obviously asked people not to buy pies and food and stuff like that. Just how many
Well,
people
again, Patrick,
do or
I feel like you're targeting me here because clearly, I would want to buy a pie, but I don't need one. Same as the merch.
There are plenty of burger vans outside the ground, is what I would say, John. Plenty of non-Celtic vendors available. And obviously, you don't want to. I wouldn't encourage anyone to, start an argument of anything with anyone that is buying a pie. I don't think we should be giving club money through these revenue streams. But if
The
people
pie
choose to
wars.
do so, fights breaking out in the concourse, kebab pies flying everywhere.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I mean, like people not going in. Yeah, I think it was the first 10 minutes of the Kelly game or so. Not to start arguments with people who choose to, go in for the first 12 minutes or so. Not to, you know, shout abuse at people walking out the superstore and walking out
Yeah.
with a £230 puffer jacket. You know, if they want to do that, then that's up to them. It won't be me, I can tell you that. But you know, that's all the time we have today. I'm glad we have left it on a slightly light-hearted note. Acsom is live with Chris Sutton on October 31st, Halloween, down in Greenock. It's along the bottom there, so I'm assuming there are some tickets left. I know they sell out pretty fast, so if you want to get along, I would definitely recommend doing that, you know, as soon as possible. Um, I've been Patrick McGill. I've been lucky to be joined by John Yogi Hughes on this Acsom Wednesday. Missing Paul John, but I'm sure he'll be back tomorrow. And myself and John will be back next Wednesday on a Celtic State of Mind.
Hail, hail, troops.